Masechet Kiddushin, Daf Ayin Vav. We quoted the opinion of the sages who said that a Samaritan is not allowed to marry another Samaritan. We saw a few different reasons, and now we have one last one. V'yesh omerim lefi she'en bikin bediktuke sofrim. The third opinion is that the Samaritans are not careful with the details of mitzvot. Either they don't know them, or whether they know them or not, they're not careful. In fact, the Samaritans keep the Chamisha Chumshei Torah, but they do not believe in the authority of Nevi'im, Ketuvim, and certainly not of the oral law. So while they keep the things in the Torah very strictly according to very literal interpretation and their interpretation of it, so they are strict in mitzvot, but not in the details of the oral law, the way it's interpreted by the rabbis. And so that is going to be a problem regarding marriage laws, as we'll see in a second. Now, man yeshamim, who is this opinion? Amar Rav Idi bar Avin, Rabbi Eliezer hi, Tanya masat kuti muteret, v'adam yoseh behen yedeh chovato bepesach, v'Rabbi Eliezer oseh levishen bikin bediktu kesofrim. This yeshamim is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, because in a Braita says that Matza on Pesach that is baked and used by a Samaritan is permitted for Jews also. If you want to go to a Samaritan bakery, until today, you can go up north to the Samaritans on Pesach. You actually go and visit them on Pesach because they have a different calendar. So you can go and see them, not to participate, but to watch what they do, and they have masot, and so I don't know if the about this way the Samaritans make their masot today, but at least back then, in the times of the Tanaim, the Samaritans, their masot are permitted. They're kosher. You could use them, and you can even use them for the seder to fulfill one's mitzvah of eating masa. That's the majority opinion. However, Rabbi Eliezer says, no, you cannot do that because although the Samaritans bake masot and they're careful not to make it hametz and all that, they're not careful with all the details. A lot of details that go into making sure masa is good, the 18 minutes, the masa shemura, all that. And so you cannot have it. So what you see here is that the opinion that says that they are not careful in the details of mitzvot, that is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. So this Yeshomrim is Rabbi Eliezer. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, kol mitzvah shechziku ba kutim harbe medaktikim ba yoter miYisrael. Continuing this Braita, there's a third opinion of Rashbag that says any mitzvah that the Samaritans do, they are more careful in it than Jews are. In other words, they don't do all the mitzvot because after all, they don't have Nach and Torah Shebe'al Peh, so they're not going to, something that we call halachah Moshe Sinai, they're probably not going to have. But the mitzvot that they do, they keep very, very carefully. Which is actually true that Samaritans and other sectarians that follow a literal interpretation of the halacha generally are more machmir than rabbinic law is. Okay, but anyway, we're following Rabbi Eliezer, who says not so. They are not careful in the mitzvot, not even mitzvot that we have in common, like eating masa. They're not careful in the details, and therefore you can't trust them. Ben and bikiin. Okay, but regarding to marriage laws, we're not talking about Pesach. We're talking about why they can't marry each other. Lefish and bikiin Kiddushin v'gerushin, because they're not careful with the details of Kiddushin and Gitin. This is a problem because let's say they get married, and remember, Samaritans are a mixture of all kinds of people, and some are Jewish. And so let's say they go get married. Let's say the marriage is good, Kiddushin, and then they decide to get divorced. And for getting divorced, they do it in some funny way, not according to halacha. They don't write the get in the way that we would consider kosher. And then they go ahead and they get, and they think they're divorced, and she goes and marries somebody else and has a child. Well, that child, according to Jewish law, rabbinic law, will be a mamzer, but they think it'll be kosher. But it doesn't matter what they think, it matters what we think. We think it's a mamzer, and therefore that lineage will be tainted. And so there could be a lot of cases like this. Maybe all their divorces are improper, or some of their divorces are improper, and therefore there are mamzerim among them. Of course, they do have marriage and gitin and Kiddushin in some sense. It's in the Torah, so they do keep it, but they're not going to keep it the right way. and therefore their divorces are invalid. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avu, mamzer machoto, mamzer meshet ach, nitarbu behem. Another opinion is that the Samaritans are involved in incest with a person and his sister, or eshet ach, a brother's wife, a sister-in-law. That they're all mixed in there, and those would produce mamzerim. This is curious because Samaritans do keep biblical law, Chumash law, and this is in the Chumash. So I'm not sure why the Talmud here is saying that the Samaritans don't keep these carefully. But anyway, my Kamash Matlan, what is this teaching us? Why does it have to give us two examples? If it wants to tell us that they think that it wants to tell us that that the halacha is that chayave keretot produces a mamzer, so just have one. Maybe that's what it means. Not that the Samaritans permitted a sister or a sister-in-law. It's in Torah, does not permitted, but they may have thought that it does not cause mamzerut, which is a one opinion among the rabbis as well. And so it doesn't cause mamzerut, and therefore they weren't careful with the children of such a union. They were allowed to marry, but we say halacha is not so, that it does produce a mamzer, and then that line would be no good according to the rabbis, but would be okay according to the Samaritans. So that would be the problem. Okay, anyway, if it's Rav Nachman is teaching us that we say that there is a mamzer for chayvei keretot, just give us one example, sister or sister-in-law. Why don't you give both examples? And the answer is maaseh shaya kachaya, because it was just explaining the reality. In fact, there were examples of Samaritans that had both of these problems of incest from a sister or a sister-in-law, and they didn't consider the children to be mamzerim, so they went ahead and married those children, and that's the problem with them. That's why they cannot marry even each other, because some of the Samaritans are fine or okay Jews, and some of them are mamzerim, so we can't let them even marry each other. Rava Amar, Eved v'shivcha nitarevu bahem. Isra mishumai mishum shivcha. Nitni chada, maseh shaya kachaya. Rava says that they got Evadim and Shefachot, Eved Kanani, Shivcha Kananit are mixed in among them, and they did not trace them carefully to see who is from a family of Eved or a Shivcha. Now, what's the prohibition? It's because of slavery. Fine, we understand that Shivcha will produce, will continue and be inherited. So just give us one example. Why do you have to give us, if it wants to tell us that there's a prohibition of Shivcha, and that they have that mixed up in them, so why not just say that to tell us the principle? And the answer is, again, that this actually happened. It happened with some males and females that were avadim and shefachot, and did get mixed up, and they weren't careful to separate out those lineages, and therefore some of the Samaritans have a bad lineage because of that. Next Mishnah, הנושא אישה כהנת צריך לבדוק אחריה באימהות שהן שמונה, אימא ואם אימא ואם אבי אימא ואימא ואם אביה ואימא ואם אביה ואימא. לוויה וישראלית מוסיפין עליהן עוד אחת. If someone's going to marry a kohenet, and so this guy wants to check to make sure that she has proper lineage. Now, what is he checking for? Well, it depends who he is. If he's a Levi or Israel, the man, then he has to make sure that she does not have problems that he cannot marry, like a mamzeret. And things like that. If he is a Kohen, he has to check for those things. Plus, he has to make sure that she is not someone that he is not allowed, a Kohen is not allowed to marry, like a halala. Okay, so where the guy would be checking for different things, the machloket among the Rishonim, what kind of guy we're talking about, right? But in fact, both kinds of people would have to check. Now, if the guy's marrying a bat kohen, the kohen families are generally more careful with their lineage. So then he has to check back a generation or two, as we'll see. He has to check back. So this is 4 imahot. And this is not talking about the Sarai, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, but rather his prospective wives, 4 his mother and grandmothers, as we'll see. I'll show you a chart, and that's actually 8 because you take each of those women and you add their mothers. So you only have to check 8 people regarding if it's a family of a Kohen, a Bat Kohen. But if someone is marrying a Bat Levi or a Bat Yisrael, then you have to go back yet another generation because families of Leviim and Yisraelim are not as careful with their lineage. So we have to do an extra check. Luckily, we have a nice chart here. So the darker color here is if it's a Bat Kohen. So someone's going to marry a Bat Kohen, and he wants to make sure, if he is a Yisrael, wants to make sure she's not a Mamzeret or Eved or Asufi and so on. If the guy is a Kohen, he's going to check to make sure that she is not Chalala and other problems. So if she's a Bat Kohen, the family of a Bat Kohen is going to be generally careful. So you have to check 4 imahot. That means her mother, her father's mother, and her, that's 2, her mother's maternal grandfather, and her father's paternal grandfather. So these 1, 2, 3, 4 would be the main 4, but that turns into 8 because for each of these 4 people, you have to go back 1 generation. So you see, it's uneven because her mother is a first 1 generation away. So then you have to go back 1 before that. That's only her grandmother. That's 2 generations. You don't have to go back any further if she's a Bat Kohen because Bat Kohen is careful. Now the other guys are men. Now Gemara's going to ask why don't we check the men themselves? But we'll answer that in a second. But instead, we go back to the nearest female. So that would be at over here, the grandmother level. So she goes back yet 1 more generation as well. And for the others, the father's father or the mother's father, that's going to go back here 3 generations. So you have to check those. And that's the 4, but it's 8. So you have to go back always 1 more. So wherever you're checking the nearest female in each line, you're also going to go back 1. So therefore, if it's she's a Bat Kohen, you check these 8 that have a dark color. If someone is marrying a Bat Yisrael or a Bat Levi, then you have to check more. We're going to see in the Gemara is going to be 2 opinions. You have to check all those 8, of course, plus something. Plus what? One opinion is going to say plus 4 more, right? Go back 1 generation for each. So that would be 12. Another opinion says you have to go back 2 generations for each. So that's going to be plus another 4 after that. So that's 16. So that would be the most. The opinion that says the most would be for Bat Yisrael and Bat Levi. That says you have to check each of the 4, and you have to go back another 3 generations plus those 4, which would be 16 altogether. All right, so that's the first part of the Mishnah. Now, continue. En bodkin lo min hamizbech ulema'ala ve'lo min haduchan ulema'ala ve'lo min hasanedrin ulema'ala. If, while we're checking, we find any man within that family tree that was a Kohen who served on the Mizbeach, Kohen who served in the Mizbeach, then we know that guy was pre-checked. This is like, right, TSA pre-check. This is Kohen altar pre-check. So, for example, let's say we know her father, right, was a Kohen who served in the Bet HaMikdash. Well, then for sure he's pre-checked that all of his ancestors are good, so you don't have to go back any further. Or let's say her maternal grandfather was a Kohen who served on the Mizbeach, and then you don't have to go and check any further. You still have to check the other lines, but you wouldn't have to check that person. So that's like a pre-check certificate. Not only Mizbeach, also anyone who served on the Duchan, Kohen or Levi who served on the Duchan, because that's where the Sanhedrin was, and they checked and make sure that people that served there playing instruments and singing in the temple, that they would be good. And also, if someone is a member of the Sanhedrin, then they're checked to make sure they're good. We're going to discuss that and explain that a judge has to have good lineage. And not only those people, but also if you find a father along the way that was an official, a public official, or a collector of tzedakah, those people we had to make sure were good lineage, so they're pre-checked. and they can marry even a Kohen, right? They're checked for everything, all the things that even the Kohen could just marry them. They're kosher, and you don't have to go and check further there in their lineage. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Af mi shehaya hatum ayed be'arki hayeshana shel Sipori. Even someone who signed as a witness in the court of old Sipori. Either it's an old court of Sipori or a section of Sipori that's the old section. So old Sipori, there was a court there. Arki is a Greek word that means a judge or a magistrate. And someone who signed, one version is signed as a witness there, so they would check to make sure the witness was good, or another version is signed as a judge there. Okay, so they were very careful, so it's all good. Rabbi Chanina ben Antignos Omer, Af mi shaya muchta be'isteratia shel melech. Also someone who was in a list of army recruits for a Jewish king. Whereas we're going to see, to be a soldier in a Jewish king, you have to have good lineage. Well, why does that help? Maybe good eyesight, good muscles. You want to be strong. What help will good lineage be? That there was no mamzerut in your grandfather. How does that help you fight? The Gemara will explain all this. Okay, so anytime if you see that there's someone in a person's lineage who was part of that army service and in the list, then you don't have to check any further before that. Gemara, Maishana benashe badkina, Maishana begabre la badku. How come when we're checking, a guy's going to marry a woman, we check all her maternal or her mother, grandmother, other grandmother, great-great-grandmother? How come we only check the woman? How come we don't check the men? And the answer is, Nashe dechi minsu behade hadade ba'arayot hu deminsu. V'imita dika milleta la'it le kala. Gabre dechi minsu behade hadade b'yochasin hu deminse. Imita dika milleta it le kala. Because when women fight and call each other names, they call each other names that have to do with arayot, meaning promiscuity. Right? Say, oh, you're promiscuous. No, you're promiscuous. But that won't necessarily affect their lineage. Just saying, when... I don't know, you were single, you were very promiscuous. So that's what they call each other. And so if there was a problem of lineage, we wouldn't know about it. That's what we have to investigate. But men, when men fight, they call each other names that have to do with their lineage. They say, you're a mamzer, you're a ben mamzer, your grandmother was a mamzer. And so if it was nowadays, people just, say curse names just because they don't like someone. But in those days, they were particular. When they're cursing someone out, they would know that this person, let's say they had some problematic lineage, so usually you try to keep it quiet, right? Forget about it, as we said before, let them just mix in. But if you get into a quarrel with someone, and that person knows that there was some problem back, 3-4 generations ago, they'll kind of reveal it, says, I know something about you, and now that you bothered me, I'm gonna reveal it and say, oh, your grandfather was a mamzer, and therefore you're no good. Now, and that's how then we would go and check and see, is that true? Let's go and check it out. And then that would be revealed. So if you have someone, if someone has bad lineage as a man, we would know about it because everybody gets into a quarrel or sooner or later, and so it would be revealed. If no one ever called this guy a mamzer or a eved or ben eved or anything like that, then we assume that he's kosher. We don't have to check because otherwise it would be known. Someone would have called him such a name. Whereas women don't call each other names like mamzer and eved and all that, and that's why we have to check the woman. All right, interesting. Now the Mishnah only mentioned if a man wants to marry a woman, we have to check the woman's lineage. What about the other way around? How come a woman doesn't have to check the man's lineage and check his, mother and grandmother and whatever? This supports Rav, because Rav says that kesherot, kosher women, are permitted to marry pesulim, not mamzerim, but we're talking about for kehuna, chalalim, and or gerim, or eved meshuchrar, and so therefore it's okay. They don't have to check those things because a kosher woman is allowed to marry such men, whereas a kosher man is not, a kohen is not allowed to marry such women, but a bat kohen is allowed to marry such men. רב עדה ברהבה תנא, 4 אמהות שהן 12, במתניתה תנא 4 אמהות שהן 16. So we have two baraitot. Rav Ada barahava says that there's 4 women, but it turns into 12. So obviously we're talking about not a bat kohen. Bat kohen, you only have to check 4, that's 8, right? Only the dark ones. But for if someone marrying a bat Yisrael or bat Levi, how many do you have to check? So the Mishnah just said you have to check another generation. So let's see, what does that mean? So the Rav Ada says 12 altogether, but there's another Braita that says, 4 principal ones, but that turns into 16. So let's compare this to our Mishnah. Bishlam Rav Ada bar Ahava mokim la be Livia bat Yisrael. So this makes sense according to the first version that says 12. We're talking about a bat Levi or bat Yisrael, and now we understand the Mishnah said 8 for a bat Kohen and 1 more generation for a bat Levi, a bat Yisrael. That makes 12. Ela matnita nema peliga. But so it looks like the second baraita that says 16 seems to go against the Mishnah, because the Mishnah only mentions 1 generation back. My od ahat zug ahat. So we answer, no, it's fine. It's consistent with the Mishnah. When the Mishnah says 1 more, doesn't mean 1 more generation, but rather 1 more pair of generations. So that if for Bat Kohen you have 2 here, then we have to go back 2 more, and that's how you get 16. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Zod divrei Rabbi Meir, אבל חכמים אומרים כל משפחות בחזקת kashrut hen omdot. Rav says a big leniency. He says this entire Mishnah is only the opinion of Rabbi Meir. He was strict and said anytime you're going to marry someone, you got to go bring out the family tree and check all these 8, 12, 16 people to make sure that they're all good. That's opinion. But Chachamim, a majority opinion, and that would be the halacha, disagree and say, no, it's okay. You can assume based on a hazakah. Unless you have evidence that the person is no good, right? Everybody knows they're no good. There's witnesses that say there's a problem. You can assume a hazakah, chazkat kashrut, until otherwise known. That's very important. Then you don't have to do all these checks. We ask, we have another statement also in the name of Rav that says, Mishnatenu ke shekore alav ar. This opinion says that our Mishnah is the opinion of Chachamim that say you can follow a chazakah until there's an objection. According to this version, our Mishnah is Chachamim, and it's just saying, when do you have to check? Only if there's a problem. If there's no problem, you don't have to check. Now, these it ends up being the same thing, that you don't have to check if there's no objection. But the question is, according to the first opinion, Rabbi Meir is author of the Mishnah. According to the second version of Rav, the Mishnah is according to Chachamim. So we answer, Man de matneha la matneha. The one who taught this statement of Rav didn't teach that one. There's 2 versions of what Rav said. We know that Rav said you don't have to do a check. You don't have to check all these people. How did he reconcile that with the Mishnah? That is 2 versions, either by saying that the Mishnah is Rabbi Meir Chachamim, or that the Mishnah is only in a case where there is a problem. Another version of these 2 statements here. There's 2 versions of the statement. Now there's another version of the 2 versions of the statement. That this is the same. The Mishnah's opinion of Rabbi Meir. Chachamim say that everybody has a chazakah. So that you don't have to check. And Rav said, and the second statement of Rav says, but if there is a problem, if someone registers a complaint, then you have to go and check. And this version, both statements of Rav are consistent with each other. Both say that the Mishnah is only opinion of Rabbi Meir, and Rav says independently not concerning the Mishnah, that if there's a problem, you have to go and check. But the Rav could have said both of these things. They don't contradict each other. Next, en bodkin min mizbeach ulema'la. My tama. If someone served at the mizbeach, you can assume they're kosher. How do you know? Because if they didn't check him, they wouldn't let him go up. Where before, someone says, "Okay, it's your turn. You're kohen. It's your mishmar. It's your turn. You can go and sprinkle blood on the mizbeach." Wait a second. Before you go to the Sanhedrin. Get a certificate of your lineage. Make sure it's okay. Only then. can they serve? Anyone who's on the duchan, on the above all the stairs, and they're there playing, the Leviim playing instruments. The Kohanim would blow chatzotzrot there, and so anyone who's there, you know that they have good lineage. How do you know? Because we have a statement that teaches that's where the Sanhedrin was right there, and they would check to make sure anyone who's coming up on that level, we have to check their lineage and get a certificate before they could be standing there. And anyone who was on the Sanhedrin, we don't check generations before that person. Rav Yosef said, just like a member of the Bet Din, any judge has to be clean in terms of justice. He can't have a criminal record and be a judge. He has to be someone who's morally upright, and also he has to be clean of any blemishes, meaning lineage. How do you know that this is true? Because the pasuk says you are beautiful and you have no mum. It's not talking about just literally a beautiful woman, but it's an allegory, a beautiful judge. A judge has to be beautiful morally and in terms of lineage. Wait a second, how do you know it means lineage? Maybe physical blemish, that they can't have a physical blemish. Just like a Kohen who has a physical blemish can't serve, so too anyone who has a physical blemish cannot be a judge. You're right. Okay, fine. That will be for a physical blemish. But I have another source that says, it talks about lineage regarding Moshe and the elders. When Moshe needs help to be in leadership help, and bring all the elders there with him, it says they are told, go stand with you. The elders are going to stand with you, Moshe. Now, what does that mean? They're going to stand with you? They have to be similar to you. Just like Moshe has no physical blemishes or no lineage blemish, so too the elders have to have no problem in their lineage. So now we learn that they have to be perfect in three ways: morally, physically no defect, and no problem with their lineage, just as Moshe. Dilma mishum shechina. Hold on. In that story, the story is that Hashem is going to give prophecy to Moshe, and it will overflow to the others. Maybe the reason why they have to have proper lineage in that case is because they're going to be prophets. All those 70 elders. Maybe that's why, but maybe a judge doesn't have to have good lineage. No, the pasuk says they will ease the burden of being a judge, right? They will come in and judge and be judges for you, like the parallel story regarding Yitro, who specifically talks about them being judges. And so they are acting as judges, and they can only be judges if they are similar to you, Moshe, and they have to be similar in that they have no problem with their lineage. And so that is a requirement of a judge. And therefore, if someone sat on a Sanhedrin, then we can assume they check their lineage, and they're okay, so you don't have to check any further. If someone is a public official, that means their lineage is good. Are you telling me that you can't appoint a public official from someone who has problematic lineage? We have a baraita that says anyone can be a judge for monetary law, but not for capital punishment. That's what before we were talking about the Sanhedrin. Sanhedrin can judge capital punishment, so fine, they do. But here it says anyone can judge monetary law. Now, when we analyze this, who is this including? What do you mean, everyone? Even a mamzer can do it, and that's a type of public official. So how could you say that a mamzer can be a judge for monetary matters? So that means it's allowed. So that means public officials also that oversee various monetary things should be allowed to be. Even a mamzer could do it. So that doesn't. There's no proof that someone, just because someone is a public official, doesn't mean they have good lineage. Amar Abaye b'Yerushalayim, v'chen tana Rab Shimon bar Zera beKiddushin de Levi b'Yerushalayim. No, this clause is only talking about in Jerusalem. Anyone who's voted as a public official in Jerusalem, they check their lineage, that they're not flawed. That's what we're talking about. Whereas outside, this other source that we have over here, that anyone can be a judge or a public official, even if they're a mamzed, that's talking about outside of Jerusalem. From letter of law, you don't have to. But in Yerushalayim, they wanted it to be extra holy. Also, someone who collects tzedakah, as we can assume is of good lineage. My ta'ama, kevan de minsu behadeh inashe. Tamar mo memashkenin al tzedakah vafilu berev Shabbat imita deika it lekala. So it's not an intrinsic thing that someone who collects tzedakah has to have good lineage, but rather we would know if the person had bad lineage. Because tzedakah collectors often get into fights with people. Back then, it wasn't like you give whatever you want. There was an official tax. A tax that the charity collector would go around, says everyone has to pay into the charity fund. It's required. If someone doesn't pay, then the charity collector can force them to. He can even go and take a collateral from that person, even on Erev Shabbat, when they're rushing and preparing for Shabbat. This charity collector will go into their house and take a vase and say, okay, this is collateral until you come and pay. And now people would then curse at him and say, you, and if there was a problem in his lineage, they would say, you ben mamzed, you ben eved. And they would call them names. So if there was a problem, we would know. If someone is a tax collector and no one ever called him such names, then you know that he is kosher. Now a story about this. Rav Ada bar Ahava Giora Hava. Rav Ada, important sage, and he would regularly stay at someone's house. We don't have the name of the guy, of the host, so we're just going to call him the host. That host was a convert. We're actually going to see he's from a family of a convert. His father was a convert. His mother was Jewish. The host was fighting with Rabbevai. They were fighting to get a position of authority. They're both running for public office. One said, I'm going to be the public official. The other one says, no, I'm going to be the public official. The host and Rabbevai come to Rav Yosef to judge between them. Amar lehu tinina, som tasim alecha melech mikereb achecha. Kol misimot she'ata mesim lo yeh ela mikereb achecha. The Torah says regarding a king that it has to be from among your brethren, from among you. Like now, a president has to be a natural born citizen. So not only a king, he learns, but any official that you place over you has to be from among your brethren, meaning a natural born citizen and not a convert. So, sorry, the host, you lose. Rabbevai wins. Rabbevai gets the position. But luckily, the host had an advocate. Amar le Rav Ada bar Ahava. Rav Ada, the great rabbi, who was the guest at this host's house often, he came to his defense. Afilu mom Yisrael. He says, wait a second. What about someone whose mother is Jewish? Only their father is a convert. Would you say that that's not Mikerev Achecha? Amar le imom Yisrael Mikerev Achecha karina be. And Rav Yosef, the judge, said, "Oh, if his mother is Jewish, that's okay. That's called natural born. It doesn't matter if the father is a convert." Therefore, Rav Yosef ruled that both of them can be public officials, but he chose each one an appropriate job. Rabbevai is a great sage, so he should be in charge of spiritual matters. He can appoint judges and decide who gives the derasha, the public lectures, educational things, whereas the host will deal with monetary matters, irrigation, divvying up who gets the water, ensuring that the weights and measures are correct, and so on. Amar Abaye Hilkach man de mashre surba merabanan beush pezichne leashre kerav ada baravad yada lemehefach lebizchuta. Abaye said we learned an important lesson from the story. Anyone who has guests over who are sages, make sure that your guests are among the ranks of someone like Rav Ada Barahava, who knows how to be a good lawyer and plead in your favor. If you have people like that are your guests, then when you need something, they can come and help you out. And not anyone would be able to figure out this argument that it says mother is Jewish, so he's okay. Otherwise, the host would have not gotten an official appointment at all. So luckily, he did. So you should always host great rabbis in your home. Rabbi Zera metapel behu. Rabba bar avu metapel behu. Bema rava afilu resh kore la mokme minayhu. Ben hardea afilu resh garguta la mikmu minayhu. We mentioned earlier that in Yerushalayim they would be very careful with the public officials, that they should only be of good lineage, but not necessarily everywhere. So now we're going to see a few different places. Rabbi Zera, he would appoint people with problematic lineage to public as a public official. Rabba bar Avu, also in his place, they would be fine with it. In the West, in Israel, they would not allow someone who had a problematic lineage, like a convert, to be in charge of anything, not even over measurement, which is a pretty easy, simple job. Make sure the people's measurements are good. They would not permit it. In the Harda'ah, they also were, although that was in Bavel, they would also not allow someone to be have an appointment over irrigation if he was of someone of problematic lineage. Next, Rabbi Yosef Omer, Af mi shehaya, Rabbi Yosef was one that added also someone who signed a document in the old court, or the court in old Sipori. Because in that court, before anyone signed something, they would make sure that they were of good lineage. And so therefore, if they signed in that court, we know that they're good. Rabbi Chanina ben Antignos has said that someone in the army, enlisted in the army, must be of good lineage. Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel b'chaylot shebet David. Shmuel says this is only in David's army, not just any army, just because you're called up for service or signed up for service, only in David's army. Amar Rav Yosef Ma'ikerav hityachasam basava hamilchama, reckoned by lineage for service. By yichus, it says here. So they have yichus with regard to serving in the army. Tamamai, why would it be important for someone fighting to have good lineage? Amar Rav Yosef Yehuda Amar Rav kedesh zechutan zechut avotam mesayaan, so that not only their merit but the merit of their ancestors will help them in battle. If you have someone who's a convert or whatever, then their ancestors are not going to help them. We need all the help we can get, not just physical but also spiritual help. So we bring someone of good lineage. Well, wait a second. In David's army, in Sefer Shemuel, it mentions one fighter named Selek, the Ammonite. Isn't he from Ammon, who joined the army, converted, or maybe he didn't convert, but he was a good friend? Like nowadays in Israeli army, we have a lot of Druze fighters, and they're very good. So you don't have to be Jewish to be supportive of the state of Israel and join in the army. So don't you have this guy? And he was not of good lineage, whether he was a convert or not. If he was a convert, it still is a convert, not of good lineage. My love, Ammon, isn't he an Ammonite? La diateb be'Ammon. No, he's an Israelite who happened to live in Ammon. I don't know, he moved there for some reason, but he's really Israelite. Wait, is Uriah the Hittite? It doesn't mean, my love, doesn't mean he came from Chet and he's a Hittite, not Jewish. La diati bechet. No, he's Israelite. He just happened to live in Chet. Vaika Itai Hagiti. You have Itai, who's from Gat. Gat is one of the areas of the Pilishtim. He's a Palestinian. What is he doing in David's army? That's not good lineage. And maybe you'll say the same thing for that. For him, he's an Israelite who happens to be living in Gat. Can't be that he is a Jew who's living in non-Jewish territory, because it says that David had a crown that he used to wear. It was a crown that had an idol of Ammon. It was in use. The crown was used by the idol of Ammon. Now you can't use idolatry unless it's nullified. Just like you do bitul hametz, and you say, I don't care about this. So too is possible to do bitul avodah zarah. But only a non-Jew can do bitul avodah zarah. Only the non-Jew has the power to say, this thing that was used for avodah zarah, now I nullify it. We're not using it for avodah zarah anymore. And who did this? It was Itai Hagiti, nullified this crown. So therefore, he must be not Jewish. So this is a problem. ועוד, אמר רב יהודה אמר רב, 400 ילדים היו לו לדוד, וכולם בני יפת תואר היו. And to add more to this question, Rav said that there were 400 children that David had that served in his army, and they were all the sons of Eshet Yefat Toar. When David would go and fight and would capture a place, he would take one of the beautiful women there, have a child with that woman. So these are all non-Israelite women, and so these 400 boys are all of improper lineage. And furthermore, they didn't even dress Jewish. They all had a Greek haircut like this. You would cut around and have a long, like ponytail, a long hair in the back. That was considered very beautiful by the Greeks to have it, and and they would sit in golden carts, and they would march in the front of the troops. They were going to lead the troops. And these are the mighty ones of the house of David. So you have all these people that were of non-kosher lineage. They're all at best converts, and they're all fighting in David's army. So you told me that anyone fighting in David's army is of good lineage, but here we have these 400 and the Taigiti that are not of good lineage. And the answer is that no, these boys, they weren't actually fighting in battle. They would go forth in front of the troops to frighten everyone. These were like trophy kids. Or maybe men by the time they grew up. Trophy people that would be in the front says, look, David would, the point is, David would say, look, I conquered all these 400 countries, and I took women from them, and I had sons from all of them. And so each of these men, mighty men, it's not that they were fighting themselves, but they were very beautiful. And I guess to accentuate the fact that they're not Jewish is why they had these non-Jewish haircuts, right? And that's the point. David's saying, I conquered all of these 400 different places, and so, you're next. So you better be afraid, and that would demoralize the enemy. So that's what they were doing in his army, but they weren't actually fighting. Anyone actually enlisted on the list of fighters in David's army were of good lineage, so that the merit of their forefathers would protect them. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.